then hop on over to bit.ly/3-professional-secrets to download a little document that I've created that will give you 3 tips on having a more successful holistic wellness business. I mean, I've been in business for 40 years. You don't last in a business if you're not doing something right. So these are things that I have learned along the way that really do enhance business. Oh, I did not mean to do that. There we go. Okay. So, oh my goodness, technically challenged this morning. Let me just, do you ever have days like that where tech just seems like it's arguing with you? There we go. We got this now. We've got this now. Okay. So let's get rolling with this. Today we are talking about popular versus holistic iridology, and it's a potentially interesting contrast, isn't it? Because it's probably safe to say that most people who practice iridology consider themselves to be holistic, but the question is, are they really? And as we do this again, I'm just, by way of introduction, I have been in this for 40 years, like I said a minute ago. I have studied 3 different styles of iridology. I've studied under 7 different instructors to get to where I am now. And so some of those instructors were the Jensenian or the North American style. Some of them were the holistic or the constitutional style. And I've landed on constitutional as being the holistic one, as being the one that I absolutely love and work with. As we launch into this, just also wanted to proudly display that, yes, I am an IPA certified iridologist, and I'm also an IPA certified iridology instructor. And everything I teach, even in the scope of these free webinars, is totally agrees with the IPA curriculum. So, if you decide you want to be an iridologist and you want to upgrade your skills, then join me for a class. And if you want to certify, I can help you with that as well through IPA. So little teeny bit to hopefully get you interested in hanging on to the end, because there will be a 30-second commercial at the end of this. And that is that everything that I'm teaching you now is actually a part of the course I've developed called the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System. It is the only live, online, fully mentored iridology course for holistic practitioners like herbalists, nutritionists, naturopaths, who want to streamline their clinical work without sacrificing client care. So often when we add another skill to our tool set, it means we have to drop something or we have to start picking and choosing. But what I found is constitutional iridology, the way I teach it, actually helps you to pull in anything that you've got in your training already that is relevant to the client you are working with, and helps you to do it in a streamlined way so that you're not spending a lot of extra time. The goal of the course is to teach you constitutional iridology and how to use it confidently, so you can easily integrate what you already know about nutrition and herbology to create doable client programs right in your client sessions. I got another private message from somebody who wants to talk to me about being mentored, and she's done her training elsewhere, and I can't mentor people who've trained elsewhere, but I can teach them. I find that a lot of people who have done training elsewhere did not learn how to integrate iridology into their practice, and that's a real important part of what I include in my course. Okay, enough. Let's launch into the what we're actually going to cover today. So for those of you who are joining me on Instagram, I'm going to hold my camera closer, which means it's going to be a little bit bouncy, but oh well, hopefully you can survive with that. When I first started out, like I said earlier, 4 decades ago, there was only one type of iridology available here in North America where I live. And everything was Jensenian iridology. And that's just simply all that was available. My teacher was from my hometown, and she had been to California and studied with Jensen a couple of times. And so it's what was accessible. These are some of the different iridology charts that are out there. And as we look at all of these, this is the very first chart I ever owned, and I still have it. These are great charts. They're not really awfully useful. And I don't mean to diss any of these wonderful iridologists. I know most of these people personally, But what I see happening when most iridologists use these charts is they fall into the trap of popular iridology. And that is when they see a map like this that subdivides the body into teensy weensy little tiny minute sections, and some of these sections would be maybe 2 or 3 iris fibers wide, they begin starting to dissect the body into little pieces like a medical doctor. And that kind of lures them into starting to diagnose and prescribe. Now, you've seen this online, and I know you have. You've seen people offering these free iris readings on social media platforms, and they focus on the tiny, tiny details. If an organ is really only 2 or 3 fibers wide, how can anyone really be that sure about what they're looking at? I mean, if that iris photo is tilted even a slight little bit, even by 1 or 2 degrees, everything you've just analyzed is wrong. If you're going with these little teeny tiny divisions like what we see, like what we see here on this Jensen chart. And so as we look at this, again, I'm not saying that Jensen is awful. I'm not saying that any of these people are bad iridologists. I'm just saying it lures us into a really dangerous place where the tongue can become the eye or the upper jaw, and we can just be so far off track. Now, because of that, in the early 1990s, I learned constitutional iridology, and I learned it as a very holistic way of using iridology and of looking at my client as a whole. As a result, based on a map that was designed by my instructor, Bill Cardona, I took it one step further and just added some new research onto his template, if you will, and created this Iridology map. So this is a very holistic Iridology map. Instead of subdividing every organ and every organ's area into little tiny subparts of the organ, we only work with organs that are metabolically influential. So, for example, you're not going to find an arm or a toe or a pinky finger or anything like that on this chart because those things don't affect the metabolism of the eye as a general rule. I mean, if they have cancer in them, of course they can, but as a general rule, they don't. And so we only work with functional organs here that have an impact or could have a significant impact on the functioning of the body. For example, on one of the charts, it shows an area for the renal pelvis, which is a tiny, tiny part of the kidney. We don't have a herb that works only on the renal pelvis. We don't have a diet for the renal pelvis. We don't have a vitamin for the renal pelvis. But we do have herbs and diets that work on the kidney. So it makes sense to support the entire kidney rather than subdividing. So when we have iris maps like this one that you're seeing on your screen, we are much more inclined to actually look at the interrelationship of organs. How does this organ impact that? How does this marking, which teaches us about that organ, impact what's happening over here? And it's a much more holistic approach. Rather than being distracted by those little tiny segments, we're looking at the body as a whole. This is another reason why it is so important that iridologists have a solid foundation in anatomy and physiology. If you don't understand exactly what the liver does, at least at a fairly functional level, if you don't understand what the pancreas does, how it secretes what into the bloodstream, what does it secrete into the intestinal tract, then you really can't do iridology well because iridology is not a one-to-one correlation. We're going to look at this in a moment. Let's actually look at some eyeballs and see how this works. You okay with that? Yeah? Okay, so here we have a lymphatic eye, if we're talking constitutional. Now, as a Jensenian iridologist, I would have told this person, based on these markings, that he had congested lymph and that he needed to do a lymphatic flush, and that these markers, these areas would disappear. This thickness that we see here would disappear. I would have told him that he had skin problems and that he needed to dry skin brush. I would have told him that he had lung problems. If it was a woman, I would have also included breast problems, thyroid issues, brain problems. Again, we've got liver showing up here. We've got liver showing up over here. We've got ovaries if this is a woman, or testes if it's a man. We've got some things in the kidney region. Each of these would have been a problem, and I would have itemized those. Actually, I did itemize those as a Jensenian iridologist. And then I would give lists of what they should do for each one of those areas. Here's the challenge. For all of those detailed lists that I created, for all of the recommendations I made, and I know my clients were diligent with following through with one of them. Hello, Jaziel, good to see you. Thanks for joining us on Instagram. I never did see any eyes change. In constitutional iridology, by contrast, Jaziel's from Brazil. Good to have you with us. With constitutional iridology, by comparison, we look first at the overall color, because it will teach us about the overarching tendencies within the body. So this person is a lymphatic constitution, and the fact that we have so much white in his eye suggests, or her eye, suggests that this person has an over acid predisposition, and that his body is predisposed to a bit of a sluggish flow of the blood and the lymph. But we cannot say for sure from this picture if that is the truth this person is living right now. We need to have a conversation with this person. We need to understand who they are and how they're put together, because what we see in the eyes is inherited from the past 3 or 4 or 5 generations. Okay, and so this person may not have those problems. This person may already have figured out that their lymphatic system doesn't flush well. So in spite of us seeing these markers, maybe this person is being physically active every day, and they've cut out the white flour, the white sugar, the dairy products that tend to gum up the lymphatic system. So maybe they have no lymphatic symptoms anymore. They're doing the right things based on their genetic structure to regulate how their body is working. Now, if he had symptoms like lymphatic swelling or circulatory issues or a reduced immune response, we would coach him on diet and lifestyle and supplements to get his body back on track. And we would see his symptoms improve. But having said that, we're not going to see the eye change. Every case I've ever seen of reported iris changes have been using reporting materials that have been questionable. What do I mean by that? People think that just because you've got 2 photos side by side, one that was done before and one that was done after, that proves everything, when in fact it may prove absolutely nothing, and it usually proves nothing. You have to consider what was the lighting, how bright was it, and what was the source, because that alone will alter the color of the photo. We have to know, was it the exact same camera, the resolution the same, were the camera settings for white balance, for shutter speed, for focal distance, for f-stop, were they all the same? Because if any one of those changes, it can affect the color and the color of the eye and things that we see in the photo. So every before and after case that I've ever had sent to me where they say, see, my eyes have changed, it's like, these were done with different cameras. These were done with different lighting. You can't use this for comparison. And so I'm all for being proved wrong if someone sends me photos that are actually controlled. Now, we're going to touch on a lot more today. And so let's look at some more. So a Jensenian iridologist would say that this person was really toxic and needed some deep cleaning based on these eyes, and that if these eyes, because we've got gold down here with fibers showing through, if this person did enough cleansing, these eyes would turn blue. That's what a Jensenian iridologist would say. And as a Jensenian iridologist, I would have said, with all of these rings coming around here, that this person was under a lot of stress, heading for a nervous breakdown. I would have said, you've got parasites. I would have said, you've got skin problems. I would have been telling them what the problems were. But again, for all of the cleanses and for all of the fasts and the supplements and the dietary changes that I've supervised over the last 40 years, I have yet to see pigment lighten up. I have yet to see these lines disappear. I have yet to see these lines disappear. And here's what we know now with the study of constitutional iridology. We know that pigment does not disappear with cleansing. We know that pigment is inherent. It's like inheriting a birthmark. It's there for good. It's, again, we know that pigment is inherited. It doesn't disappear. We know that the base color or the constitution is also inherent, and it teaches us where to look for strengths and weaknesses that would be inherent. Now, it's really important to remember as well that people can have health problems that we don't see a predisposition for in their eyes, right? They can earn the right to have lousy health. We can see predispositions to all kinds of things in the eyes, but they don't have to manifest all of those either, because they may be doing the right things to prevent them from the problems from showing up. So in constitutional iridology, this eye instead says that this person has inherent predispositions towards liver insufficiencies. We don't know exactly what they all are, but we know some. This person in particular may be more predisposed to issues with iron. Now, whether it's that they're prone to being anemic or prone to having too much iron, we don't know. That would be something that they might know from lab tests, or it might be something that we ask them to investigate with their doctor to go and get some lab work done. We know that this person has a high acid predisposition, and we're going to ask this person specific questions. We want to know what they're already doing. We want to know what their symptoms are so that we can understand what impact their inherent predispositions have on how their body is behaving right now. Right? So we want to ask about alcohol consumption, about coffee consumption. We want to ask about how they handle stress. We want to ask about how do they digest their food. We want to ask if there's ever been a history of any kind of iron issue. Sorry, I'm a little wobbly there for you guys on Instagram. Just had to take off my watch. It was irritating me. But the fact of the matter is these eyes are not going to turn blue. These are a true genetic mixed eye, which means they have qualities of a blue eye and a brown eye. They're not going to turn blue. The pigment in here is not toxicity. It's not exposure to heavy metals or sulfur. It's not eating too much junk food. It is just simply what their inherent tendencies are. When we understand this, that the eyes show us inherent predispositions, we then understand everything else we need to. We ask the questions. We ask questions about their own history. We ask questions about their symptoms. We ask questions about their diet. And we correlate everything back, because really your client wants help with the symptoms they've got, right? So that's where we want to start. Now, this eye suggests, again, a predominant liver potential risk. So, and some potential risks for blood issues as well, but we have to ask the questions. Now, as it turns out, this is a lovely Asian woman. And as I look at her eyes, it's highly likely that she has the predisposition that will not allow her to methylate her B vitamins properly. Now, her eyes alone didn't give me all of that detail, but I saw some things in here that made me suspicious, so I started asking. Now, she and her husband had been trying to conceive for 3 years. And as I looked at her eyes and I started asking questions based on what I saw in her eyes that could correlate to infertility, I asked her about her blood sugar balance. And she said, oh yeah, I was just diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Well, that's kind of important. And with that, then I was able to ask her as well, and have you had any other diagnoses from your doctor? And she said, yeah, they told me I have PCOS, right? And so knowing those two things and knowing what this eye looks like, we were able to craft her program. So we started with giving her methylated B vitamins. because if she doesn't methylate her own B vitamins, it's going to mess things up and make it hard to get pregnant. But if we can give her methylated B vitamins, it covers those tracks. So we did that, and that was very helpful. Again, the Jensenians, or as I would have done 35 years ago, I would have said she has to do a cleanse, and that would have done good things, and giving her supplements for her liver might have covered the methylation track for us. But I would have also told her back then that she had Arcus senilis and that she had cholesterol problems and parasite issues. Well, she didn't have cholesterol problems. She doesn't have parasite issues. And so, and Annie V, you are so welcome. I'm glad you're enjoying this. But in constitutional iridology, again, we had the conversation. What I learned is she really carries her stress. So we needed to talk about ways to mitigate stress. We learned that no, she absolutely doesn't have parasites, but the things that suggest parasites, when we put those alongside the things that suggest she is predisposed to feeling stress, these just augment each other. They add fuel to each other's fire. This can suggest, this is what we call a lipemic diathesis, and more than cholesterol and more than hardening of the arteries in the brain area, in this case, it suggests that her liver doesn't process her carbs properly, which she said when she said she was diagnosed with PCOS and type 2 diabetes. So that gave us the information we needed to know what angle to work from. And she got pregnant, had a beautiful baby boy in a 3-hour labor delivery. Yeah, so a beautiful end story for that. Lovely, lovely. Here we have another lymphatic eye. Now, for those of you on Instagram, I hope you can see this. By the time we go from computer screen to cell phone, can you see that there are patches here, that little bits that are different colors? It could look brownish or orange or rust. Technology is great for messing with our color schemes, which is another reason we need to be careful doing iris analysis online. And we do it because we have to right now. But it's another reason we need to be careful is because my computer screen, I've got 4 computer screens. Okay, a little OCD on that. But every one of them shows colors differently. And I can put this slide up on each of them, and it's going to show, one is going to show orange, one is going to show brown, one is going to show rust, right? And so they're all going to be different. And each color is interpreted differently. So a North American iridologist would look at these and would say, oh, and I'm glad you could see that, Annie. Wonderful. A North American iridologist would look at these and would say, toxic, you need to cleanse. We need to get that out of there. A constitutional iridologist would say, this teaches us about predispositions. The color of the pigment teaches us which organ wants to be out of balance. And the placement of the pigment tells us which organ is going to suffer because of that, right? Because each organ isn't totally independent. They impact everything else. Again, so we want to be really careful with that color reproduction thing on our tech to understand that what I see may not be what you see. This is really important when I teach classes. I will say to my students, on my computer monitor, this looks orange, or this looks yellow, or this looks brown. What color do you see? And then based on what color they see, I'll teach them what it means from what I see, and I'll teach them what it means from what they see. So, so important. These don't need cleansing out. They're not going anywhere. If anything, we will accumulate more of these as we get older, just as we accumulate more wrinkles around our eyes and, hopefully laugh lines around our mouth, things like that. We accumulate more gray hair. We accumulate typically more pigment. If you've got pigment, you're likely going to accumulate more. And it's just going to teach us about the inherent predispositions that are manifesting in your body. Again, in North American iridology, I would have told clients before that this person was amazingly toxic. Oh my goodness, we need to cleanse, 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 cleanse. We would have said that these rings coming around here mean you're headed for a nervous breakdown or you're just coming out of one. We would have said that this, oh my goodness, your cholesterol is so out of balance, is so out of whack. Oh my goodness, you're clogging your arteries. You are going to die. Well, I probably wouldn't have said that, but my goodness, isn't that what the client's going to hear? If we say, I'm telling you your cholesterol is really high and you're blocking arteries, it's sedimenting in arteries. What do people hear? Right? They take that to their own end conclusion, regardless of what we say. In constitutional iridology, the colors here are suggesting liver insufficiencies that could have an impact on digestion, on how nutrients are transported throughout the body. The contraction furrows, these wrinkles that are coming around the eye like this, tell us that this person is more likely to have sympathetic nervous system responses if they are not properly supported with nutrients. So if you know your A and P, you know what a sympathetic nervous system response is. All right. But we also know that these contraction furrows tell us this is a go-getter. This is a person who likes to make lists. They like to accomplish things. Sometimes they bite off more than they can chew and they end up overwhelmed. So we need to work to teach them that balance of accomplishing without getting overwhelmed. We know again that this white coming around here suggests that we've got a liver enzyme imbalance that messes with how the body processes its carbs, which could take us into cholesterol issues. It could take us into blood sugar issues. We need to ask questions. We need to know, does this person crave certain foods? Does this person, is this person's diet heavy in certain foods, so that we can help reshape things? These markings, ladies and gentlemen, are not going away. They are not going to undo themselves. They're not going to reverse. It is just not going to happen. Only when we have that conversation with our client can we actually understand what the eye means. Iridology is not a crystal ball. North American iridologists would say this person definitely has parasites. Parasites don't change our genetic structure. We can't pass parasites on through our DNA. The presence of parasites is not going to change the iris structure as well, unless you've actually got one of those nasty little parasites that lives in the surface of the eye and burrows, gross, under the surface of the skin. But that's not the same thing. That's not moving fibers around and changing what we see in the iris. So with constitutional iridology, we know this person, again, is very prone to having those sympathetic nervous system responses. And if they've got an intense lifestyle, that means that we want to help them by supporting the nervous system, by supporting the adrenal glands. We need to make sure they're getting adequate rest. These people burn the candle at both ends, and we need to have them stop that. We need to teach them how dangerous that is for them. These clients also don't need to hear every recommendation we know in every appointment. They need to hear what they need to get to the next step. So this person might, I might just simply suggest, let's make sure you're getting at least 7 hours of sleep a night, and let's reduce the coffee intake. End of discussion for today, right? If we give too much homework, they can't do it all. They get overwhelmed. Better to give a little bit that's maybe tough, but have them do it. So we have this multiple lacuna area right down here. And when we look, if we compare this to the map that we were looking at earlier on, we see that some of this is in the adrenal zone, some of this is in the ovaries. And so we want to ask questions about how do you handle stress? If this is a woman with ovaries, of course, menstrual cycles, hormones, what's going on there? We see that this line is breaking through the collarette. It spans from the stomach through the small intestines, through the heart, the bronchioles, into the parathyroid and thyroid. If any of that is relevant based on the symptoms the client has brought in, that's where we want to start, right? And we stay focused. I'm not going to deal with everything I see in the eye in one appointment or one assessment. It's too much information, some of which may be irrelevant to the client. So we start where the client is, and after we've worked on that for a bit and we've got progress, then they're going to have other symptoms they want help with. We'll work on those. When they run out of things that are a concern to them, then we can ask, would you like to go deeper? And if they say yes, we can then talk about a couple of other markings that could be significant in the long term and begin working preventively that way. Our clients, again, only need to hear what they need that will take them the next step on their journey. They don't need to see the entire roadmap from now till the age of 97. They need to know what to do for the next 2 to 4 weeks. Manageable steps. In this beautiful lymphatic eye, again, we need to not just consider the color, but we're considering the way the fibers are sitting, because this layer of information adds to our understanding of organ systems and their inherent predispositions. North American Iridology would teach us that each one of these things is a current problem that needs to be addressed right now. Each one of these is a pathological issue. If that is true, this person's got problems with their brain, their pituitary, their bronchioles, their adrenals, their kidneys, the perineum, the rectum, the bronchus, the parathyroid. And we would also teach them that if they did all the right things, these markings would go away, that they would change their genetic structure. In constitutional iridology, I'm going to tell you that telling them that things will change is frustrating, because they may work very hard for a year and a half or 2 years and they won't see a change. So now they're frustrated. Now they think you're a quack. Now they think you don't know what you're talking about, and iridology is bohunk, right? And so we need to avoid that. In constitutional, we would say that each of these lacunae are inherited. Whether we need to address them right now or not is going to depend on the client's symptoms, right? And so if the client has concerns that are coming up into the brain, maybe they've got lots of headaches and brain fog and things like that, I'm going to focus here. Do any of these other markings, anything else that I see in the eye, give me more information about this? If they do, great, I'll work with them. If they don't, I'm going to leave them for a later date. But I'm going to ask it then again about personal and family history based on their symptoms, based on what I see in the eyes, because the markings are passed down for 3 to 4 generations. This person, though, may, and I get these people coming into, they come in and they say, I feel really good. I just want to know what my eyes teach me. All right, so feel really good. Tell me about your history. You feel good now. Have you always felt good? Are there any things you're concerned about in the future based on what you see in your extended family? Let's talk about your diet. What is your diet like? What is your lifestyle like? Great. Now with that information, let's look at your eyes and see if we get what we get for further information that can take us deeper. If this person is already living a really wholesome lifestyle, they are physically active, they're getting enough rest, they're great with recognizing when they're under stress, and they're doing things to deal with that and to mitigate it. They've got a really clean, well-balanced diet, as in lots of vegetable, an appropriate amount of protein, an appropriate amount of good sourced carbs. I may not need to change anything. Or there might be 1 or 2 little tweaks that would be appropriate for this person at this point in time, right? And so we don't look and say, all the way around, all these uh-ohs, because they may not be relevant at this point in time. In North American Iridology, every marker, like every little patch of color, every fiber separation, every place where color is spread around, every fiber that's going in a different direction is a current problem that needs to be addressed right now. It's really overwhelming. When I used to practice iridology this way, I was overwhelmed giving my clients that much information. But that's how I'd been taught to do it. And so I thought that was the right way. I actually have friends that own a funeral service, and I began to think I should be keeping their business cards in my desk and handing them out to every client, because every client was left and we was like, oh my goodness, there's so much in these eyes, you're going to die anyways. So here, start planning now, right? It wasn't a good place to be. Holistic iridology, the idea again is to integrate the markings, to understand how they play off each other, how they work together, to put the story together. Markings have a different value and an impact and interpretation depending on what other markings are present, depending on what symptoms are happening, depending on what the family history actually is. And so we need to be able to craft this. Raw generative detox is saying it really is way too much too soon. It is, isn't it? Way too much too soon. Never appropriate. Never appropriate. A North American iridologist would say this person has a weak constitution. Now, how would that make your day? You go to see someone to learn about your health and you leave when they're saying you have a weak constitution. There's no hope for you. That's it. Game over. You're doomed to a sickly life. Forget it. Don't even try, right? Not a good thing to do. In constitutional, we call this a connective tissue type. With that understanding, we know that this person's glue that holds their body together is probably not tough and robust. And they're going to need digestive support to make sure they're breaking their foods down into components well enough. They may need things like collagen or some other supplements to help them, again, provide the building blocks they need to be able to digest, to be able to build the strongest body they possibly can. In this type of an eye, each and every marking is absolutely not important, because can you imagine going around here looking at every one of these markings? How overwhelming that would be, how hopeless that would make your client feel. We are the hope. Holistic practitioners are the hope. The medical profession does not give hope, right? So when we see and understand what this client's history is, what their inherent potential is, when we understand where they're starting from, we can use everything we see here, filter through it because we have that training, and understand which of this is important and what parts do we share with the client now that will help progress them on their journey in wellness. We don't get bogged down in every little detail. It's so important. When we do holistic iridology, actually the iris map is the very last step of the process, right? We look at color first, we look at fiber structure, we look at pigment placement, we juxtapose that on history, and then if we need to, we go to the map. The map is the very last step. And Annie says, yes, holistic medicine is so hope-giving. Yes, it gives people back the power to actually begin rebuilding their health. And they get to be in charge. That's what I love. We are the teachers. They are the healers. And I think that's an important perspective for us to have. We can always go to the map later on, right? If we don't use the map in the first appointment or the second or even the third or fourth, we can go to it at any time when we feel it's warranted. And that's very empowering for us, because what it means is you can be with a client for the very first time. Maybe you're in a place where restrictions right now are such that you can't be face to face, but as in within 6 feet of them, but you can see their eye color. You can see that they have lymphatic eyes like this, and you can see from a few feet away that there's white and yellow. That's all you need. You'd be able to see from that far away that the fiber structure was very uneven. That's all you need to start them with. You can give them so much good information based on that after having had a conversation with them. When we understand iridology this way, you can actually do an assessment from several feet away without even using a magnifying glass. Certainly a magnifying glass and getting closer, or a special camera, lets you see way more detail, and that can be beneficial, but it's not critical. It's really helpful. So when we practice iridology in the constitutional way, we don't overwhelm our clients. We avoid overwhelming them. We can create our programs for the client very quickly, because we're not giving them information that's going to last them 10 years. We're giving them information that's going to last them 2 to 4 weeks. Something they can build on, something they can work on creating as a habit that we can then build on the next time we see them. And it is so, So important that we do that. So with that, again, I just want to pop in a short commercial here for the Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology Assessment System, which is a course I've developed that contains all of the IPA Level 1 and Level 2 certification curriculum. This course is live online and fully mentored. It's for nutritionists, herbalists, and holistic practitioners who want to streamline their clinical work without sacrificing client care. It's for practitioners who want to be able to create client programs in their client sessions rather than doing that on their own time and not getting paid for that time, right? Really important that we make sure we're using our time effectively and efficiently and in our client's best interest. Creating programs like this allows you to create programs that your client can actually stick with. The more time you spend creating the program, the more you'll overwhelm your client, the less likely they will stick with it, the less likely they're going to come back to see you, right? So you create a simple program that will take them to the next step. They're going to love it. They're going to stick with it. They're going to come back to see you. If that is of interest to you and you would like to know more, because this is a live course with a firm start date, join me tomorrow at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. So that's Thursday, December 10th at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. We started today at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, just if you need that as a reference, for an information session. And you can go to iridology.education/webinar to register for this session, where I'm going to give you all the details about the class, who will benefit most from taking it, how is the course delivered, what learning and teaching materials are included for you in the program, how many lessons are involved, how are they delivered, what kind of support do you get between classes and even after your course is finished. What support do I give you if you're preparing for certification with IPA? It's all going to be included in the webinar tomorrow at 5 p.m. So that is, again, iridology.education/webinar. So if you have any questions, this would be a great time to ask them. If you're on Facebook, I can only monitor one of the pages that this is being shared to right now, but I will certainly go back and look for more questions and comments when we're done here. Instagram, any questions from anybody there? Webinar, any questions from anybody there? And I know we've got one person on the webinar who is, she's already put her hand up and she's going to be registering for the course pretty quick here. So that's exciting. So good to have her on board with us. If nobody has any other questions, I hope to see you tomorrow night. And thank you so much for being with me today. Have a fabulous day and stay safe. Bye for now.